Ibrahim Traoré changed a village's destiny. What the villagers did next will amaze you. Rain was falling, and so was blood in the village of Nabugui. Ibrahim Traoré stepped out of his official convoy, his feet sinking into mud. The military uniform he wore still carried an unfamiliar weight despite having taken office just 4 days earlier. He looked around. What he saw took his breath away. Nabugui village was no longer a village. Houses burned, trees toppled, animals dead. But worst of all were the people, the expression in the eyes of survivors. Empty stares, hopelessness, a bewildered fear. "Mr. President," said General Kabore, approaching him, "it's not safe to stay here. Intelligence says the militants might return." Traoré nodded but didn't move. His eyes were fixed on an elderly woman across from him. She knelt before the ruins of what was once a home, her trembling hands trying to gather something from the soil. "Who is this woman?" Traoré asked, his voice low. "I don't know, Mr. President," said his aide. "Perhaps one of the village elders." While his security team exchanged tense glances, Traoré began walking toward the woman. This was a habit his soldiers didn't appreciate. His disregard for protocol and security measures. "Mother," said Traoré, crouching beside her. "What are you looking for?" The elderly woman looked up. Her eyes were misty but her gaze sharp. She opened her palm. Inside were a few half-burned seeds. "Our last seeds," she said, her voice carrying the weight of years. "If we lose these too, we can't plant anything next season." And then... She didn't finish her sentence. She didn't need to. Traoré took the seeds in his palm. They looked simple, tiny brown grains, but these grains meant survival for a village, perhaps an entire region. "What's your name, Mother?" he asked. "Fatima," she said. "They took my son Bukari. My grandchildren are here alive, but they have no food." Traoré looked around again. There were perhaps 30 survivors in the village, mostly women and children. The men had either been killed or taken as volunteer soldiers. At that moment, a decision formed in Traoré's mind, one that no one could have predicted, one his military advisors would strongly oppose. "General Kabore," he said, standing up, "distribute all food from the convoy to the villagers." "But Mr. President, for the return to the city, one more thing," Traoré continued. "The military units will stay here for 3 weeks." The general's face tightened with surprise. 3 weeks? Why, Mr. President?" Traoré gestured to the people gathering around them. "Because we're going to rebuild this village, and not just the houses, the fields too. We're going to replant these seeds." Fatima looked at Traoré with tearful eyes, unable to comprehend. "But why?" "Because," said Traoré, walking to the center of the village, "if life doesn't return to normal in every corner of Burkina Faso today, we'll have nothing tomorrow." General Kabore approached his president, lowering his voice. "The soldiers aren't trained for this kind of mission, Mr. President. They're fighters, not farmers." "Now they'll be both," said Traoré. Then he raised his voice, addressing the villagers. "I am Ibrahim Traoré, your president. Today I make you a promise. The village of Nabugui will once again be one of the places where the heart of Burkina Faso beats, and we'll do this together." The villagers looked at each other in astonishment. No leader, especially one newly in power, would make such a promise, taking such a risk for a small, insignificant village. "To begin," Traoré continued, "set up the tents and supplies. We're staying here today." That evening, soldiers and villagers sat around the same fire. Traoré was among them, the top buttons of his uniform undone, listening. Fatima told stories, how the village used to be, how fertile it was, how they held festivals. "It will be again," said Traoré, as the flames illuminated his face. That night in Ouagadougou, ministers gathered in the government building asking where the president was. Scheduled meetings had been postponed, and no explanation was given. "Maybe he's been kidnapped," said Defense Minister Durand, unable to hide the worry in his voice. "He wasn't kidnapped," said Foreign Minister Ouedraogo, looking out the window. "He's in Nabugui village in this storm. He's begun reconstruction efforts with the villagers." "What?" shouted Finance Minister Sankara. There's nothing in the budget for this. This is madness. Yes, said Ouedraogo. Perhaps the exact madness we need. The next day, an unusual scene unfolded in Nabugui village. Soldiers had set aside their weapons and were working shoulder to shoulder with villagers. Some cleared debris, some removed wreckage, others dug foundations for new homes. Traoré was among the workers, no longer in his official uniform. His shirt was stained with mud, his hands calloused. Mr. President, a soldier approached, voice low. I want to confess something. Traoré straightened up, wiping sweat from his forehead. Speak, soldier. I come from a farming family. I know how to plant millet, corn, and sorghum. A smile appeared on Traoré's face. Now you're our agricultural engineer. Find out how many soldiers we have and train them. The soldier was surprised. But Mr. President, I'm just a corporal. Now you're a farmer corporal, said Traoré, placing his hand on his shoulder. And the fate of this village is in your hands. Corporal Ouedraogo, Maurice by his real name, stood straight as if receiving an order. Yes, Mr. President. Days passed. The village slowly began to take shape. Houses were built, simple but sturdy structures. But what really mattered were the fields. Under Maurice's leadership, soldiers and villagers cleared the burned fields and prepared the soil. On the 7th day, it was time to plant seeds. Fatima's rescued seeds were extremely valuable, but not enough. Then something unexpected happened. A cloud of dust appeared on the road to Nabugui. Soldiers went on alert, running for their weapons, an approaching convoy. But this time it wasn't official vehicles coming. It was villagers, people from 6 surrounding villages. They brought seeds, tools, animals, and food. What's happening? Traoré asked Maurice. Word has spread, Mr. President, said Maurice, his eyes shining. They heard you were here saving a village. The leaders of the villages gathered before Traoré. The eldest stepped forward. Mr. President, he said, we are Burkina Faso. If one village falls, we all fall. If one village rises, we all rise. Traoré was moved, speaking with difficulty. Thank you, but I'm only doing my duty. The old man smiled. No, Mr. President, you're setting an example and we're joining you. That day, seeds were planted in the fields around Nabugui village. People from 7 villages worked together side by side with soldiers. And in the evening, they held a great celebration, a festival not seen in these lands for years. Traoré was preparing to return to Ouagadougou the next day. Fatima approached him. Will we see you again, Mr. President? She asked. When the crops mature, said Traoré, we'll harvest together. Fatima bowed her head. We owe you a debt we can't repay. Traoré held the woman's hands. No, mother. By rebuilding your village, you're paying Burkina Faso's debt. Because this country stands on the labor of people like you. When he returned to Ouagadougou, a surprise awaited Traoré. News of the village events had spread throughout the country. Hundreds of people had gathered in front of the palace. But this wasn't a protest. It was a celebration. What happened? He asked his aide. The news reached everywhere, Mr. President, said his aide. And now everyone is asking, when is it our village's turn? Traoré greeted the people, then immediately called his ministers to a meeting. We're starting a program, he said, as soon as he sat at the table. It's called Build Your Own Village. Every minister, every general, every high-ranking official will choose a village and stay there for 3 weeks. They'll conduct their business from there. The cabinet was shocked. The finance minister jumped to his feet. Impossible. Our budget can't handle this. Right now, said Traoré, Nabugui village and the 6 surrounding villages are being rebuilt with their own resources. We haven't spent a penny, because when people see their leaders standing with them, they begin to stand with each other. But we're not soldiers, much less builders, the health minister protested. Neither was I, said Traoré, smiling. Then, a corporal stepped up and said he was a farmer. He looked around the table. Has none of you ever worked in a field, built a house, raised animals? A silence fell over the room. Then Education Minister Aisha Maiga, a quiet woman, spoke. I come from a farming family, she said. My father grew corn, So do I, said the infrastructure minister. And in my first profession, I was a mason. One by one, almost all cabinet members confessed their rural origins. You see, said Traoré, we came from this country's soil. Now it's time to return to that soil. 3 months later, an incredible transformation was taking place across the country. More than 200 villages had become part of the program. Ministers, generals, even foreign diplomats were seen in rural areas of Burkina Faso, helping local people. Photos circulated on social media. The defense minister carrying muddy bricks, the foreign minister teaching in a village school. But the most shared image was Traoré's return to Nabugui. When he came to see the fields, Fatima greeted him. Children beside her ran toward Traoré's car. He's here, they shouted. The seed president is here. Traoré laughed, embracing the children. How's it going, Mother Fatima? The woman smiled, her eyes different from before. Now there was hope. Come, she said. You'll want to see. They toured the fields. Millet, corn, sorghum, all had grown, looking strong and healthy. The harvest will begin in 2 weeks, said Fatima, and we'll have enough to sell, not just to feed ourselves. In the village square, there was now a newly built school. Children studied here. But besides regular lessons, they also learned farming. Maurice's idea, said Fatima proudly. Our children now learn both reading and living with the land. In the evening, the whole village held a great celebration. Drums were played, dances performed. Traoré danced too among the crowd, just like everyone else. And then, the unexpected happened. In the village square, villagers approached Traoré. Their leader, Fatima's son Boukari, who had managed to escape from the militants, carried a box. Mr. President, he said, we have a gift for you. He opened the box. Inside was a small seed sculpture made of gold. This is too valuable, said Traoré, astonished. Not as valuable as what you did, said Boukari. You didn't just rebuild our homes, you rebuilt our hope. Traoré took the golden seed, showing it to the crowd. This, he said, his voice echoing, across the village square, is just a beginning. Because Burkina Faso is a country that starts with one seed but grows forests. That night on the return journey, Traoré turned to his aide. What's my schedule for tomorrow? Cabinet meeting with the French ambassador, economic report presentation. Cancel it, said Traoré. We're going to the eastern villages, the regions that experienced drought last week. His aide was surprised. But Mr. President, the ambassador is coming for a very important trade agreement. Traoré looked out the window at his country's rural landscape, vibrant even at night. Tell him to come with us. If he wants to see the real Burkina Faso, he'll find it in the villages, not in the palace. The next day, international media watched in amazement. The French ambassador had taken off his tuxedo, rolled up his shirt sleeves, and was digging a well with Burkina Faso farmers. And beside him, working the same way, was a president. When a journalist asked, "This isn't normal diplomatic practice, President Traoré. Why do you do this?" Traoré's answer was simple. Because normal diplomacy brought Burkina Faso here. Now it's time to try something different. And we'll succeed because from our smallest village to our largest city, we're children of the same soil. 1 year later, Nabugui village had changed beyond recognition. The houses were solid, the fields productive. But more importantly, there was a new energy in the village. Young people now chose to stay in the village rather than migrate to cities. Maurice had become the village's official agricultural advisor. He rarely wore his uniform now, mostly working in the fields with farmers. You know, Traoré said to Maurice during his last visit, you changed this village's destiny. Maurice shook his head. No, Mr. President, you changed it. I just shared something I knew. That's exactly it, said Traoré. We all know things we don't share, but when we share, miracles can happen. Upon his return to Ouagadougou, there was an international conference, an African Union summit. Leaders were making long speeches about economic development and security issues. When Traoré's turn came, He brought something to the podium. One of those half-burned seeds Fatima had shown him that day. "This," he said, raising the seed, "is Africa's future. As small as a seed with potential as big as a forest. And just as a seed needs the right soil, the right water, the right care, our people need the same." The other leaders listened carefully.
News of how Traoré had revitalized villages and achieved economic growth in 1 year had spread throughout the continent. "What I learned from Nabugui village is this," he continued. "When you care about even the smallest place, you can start."
The biggest changes, and leadership is done not from the palace but from among the people. At the end of the summit, several African leaders announced they would start similar programs. "You've started a new movement," said the president of Ghana, shaking Traoré's hand. "No," said Traoré, smiling. "I reminded us of a very old movement. Help yourself, and the world will help you." 5 years later, Nabugui village had become a model. Education level, health facilities, agricultural productivity, it had improved in every area. And more importantly, the village could now stand on its own resources. Fatima was now one of the respected elders of the village. She was in charge of the new seed bank, the person who stored, protected, and distributed all the village's seeds. "Do you remember?" said Traoré during his last visit. "When I first came, how you were trying to protect the seeds?" Fatima smiled. "Yes. That day I didn't know our village's destiny would change." "Neither did I," said Traoré. "I was just trying to do the right thing." "And you did," said Fatima. "Now look." In the village square, a ceremony was taking place. Morris had now been officially elected as the village mayor. But at the ceremony, his strongest supporters were the soldiers who once worked under his command. Many had chosen to settle in the village when their service ended. "This isn't just the story of one village," said Traoré, watching the people in the square. "This is the story of how a nation can change." In the evening, village elders gathered at Fatima's home. Traoré was among them, now not as a president, but as a friend. "Shall I tell you a secret?" said Fatima, serving tea. "That day, trying to save the seeds, we were actually hopeless. We didn't think anyone would help us." "And now?" asked Traoré. Fatima looked out the window. In the square, young people were dancing. Children were playing. The lights of new homes were glowing with a warm radiance. "Now," she said, "we know that even in the darkest time, one who dares to plant a seed may one day sit in the shade of a forest." That night, as Traoré left Nabugui, he stopped at the village entrance. 5 years ago, there were only ruins here. Now it was full of life. "This is why we fight," he told his aide. "For places like this, for people like these." When he returned to Ouagadougou, a report awaited him on his desk. Economic growth had steadily increased over the past 5 years. Agricultural production had reached record levels. And most importantly, migration from rural areas to cities had reversed for the first time. Traoré looked at the report, then out the window toward his country's horizon. Fatima's words were in his mind. "Even in the darkest time, one who dares to plant a seed may one day sit in the shade of a forest." He opened the window, breathing in the fresh air. In the distance, a new day was dawning over Burkina Faso.